So, I wanted to talk a little bit about traditions in Judaism. Now, in modern day Judaism, we don't have many options as people coming back to Judaism, people of Israel, of Israelite heritage that are coming back to Judaism. We don't have many options in the Jewish world. So, it's either you accept an Ashkenazi tradition, a Sephardic tradition. I've never heard of people adopting a Temanite or Yemeni tradition that come from other parts of the world. But you've got that option, and you've also got the Mizrahi option, which is the Eastern option. Um, each one of those traditions have been heavily influenced by the place or places where those Jews have lived. The Ashkenazi have been influenced by French and Germanic and Russian cultures, and so their Hebrew reflects what world they lived in. And their expression of Judaism also depends on which world they come from. Um, I think people that have never really changed over the last millennia, 2 millennia, are probably the Shomrim, the Samaritans, and the Ethiopian Jew, or the Ethiopian Jews. They've had their lives or their Judaism pretty much standard ever since the temple days. But a tragic thing happened when obviously they went back to Israel, they were taken back to Israel, they were put into the modern mold. And the modern mold is either Sephardic or Ashkenazi. And I don't have a problem with any of these traditions personally. But I can see that sometimes there's a dislike when people learn that you're an Israelite. There's a certain dislike. Not everyone is going to have the same Jewish experience. Not everyone lived in Europe. Not everybody's grandmother went through the Holocaust. In fact, apart from Ethiopian Jews, no other African Jewish community has had so far its story told. But never mind organized and existing communities. Nobody has ever put together the history of what happened to Jews that came to Africa. We know what happened, but nobody has ever put that together, because if you're talking about Judaism from Africa, it's like you are talking about people that are trying to steal somebody else's heritage. That's the way that they are cast sometimes. But knowing who we are, I think once we've done the reconciliation of our stories with our genetic backgrounds, we will be able to understand the oral traditions that we've received. But those results of DNAs are not to prove our Jewishness or our Israelite heritage. They are there to corroborate or to understand better the oral tradition. So, what I actually want to say in this video is, how then do we know in modern Judaism which tradition is good for us? Because there is a halacha in Judaism that prohibits you from going to another community and expressing your culture in that community. But if the offerings are so limited, how do people who want to get in touch with their ancient selves, how do they express themselves? What if they don't want to pronounce the Hebrew the way that it is pronounced today? Because simply they don't have a Germanic background. They don't have a European background. How do they know how to connect to their ancient selves? Now, there are many movements out there that one can join to find something that's closer to who you are. Personally, for some reason, I relate better to North African type Judaism, Moroccan, Libyan, the freedman Judaism of North Africa. Somehow that resonates with me. But I have to find my ancient self. Um, I'm in a country where Judaism basically has got two flavors on the menu. You've got Ashkenazi, you've got Sephardic, and you must choose between the two. And I am not officially or formally in a Jewish community. I've been sitting here for a couple of months and pondering which approach I'm going to take, because I'm extremely proud of who my ancestors were, um, how they became, how they traveled all the way down to Africa, to Congo, and then to Southern Africa and became the Nguni people. Um, I'm extremely interested in expressing the heritage that came before that. Not the Nguni heritage, not the heritage we have now, because the Nguni heritage is not any different from Ashkenazi or Sephardic, because where you are or where you are exiled, that culture will have, or that world will have a deep influence on who you are. It will also have a deep influence, which is the point of this video, how you pronounce the Hebrew alphabet. It will have an influence on how your trope is like. What I mean by trope, for those who might not know, is the cantillation of the Torah when you're reading. Um, I've listened to a lot of cantillations, and especially the Yemenite one, but so far the Mizrahi one resonates with my ancient self. So I kind of identify with that. So why is it important to find the right pronunciation for you? Do I think that Ashkenazi pronunciation is not correct? Not at all. Actually, when Ashkenazi talk about a bait and they say base, it's actually closer to my ancestral pronunciation, because the tav, the letter tav without a dagesh, is a th sound. It's a th. So for us, historically, or in speaking in ancient terms, it was never Shabbat Shalom. It was always Shabbath Shalom. You know, so it was never tav but thav. So it without the dagesh. So little things like that. Why do they matter? Are these things politics? What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that the desire inside is to express an ancient Judaism. But the reality is, the menu of Judaism is modern, and it's largely been influenced by where Jews have come from. And we have to respect those Jews and their customs and what they've been through, and why they speak the way they do today. So I've decided that for my own personal Torah study and my own personal prayers, I'm going to restore the original pronunciation of the Hebrew alphabet. You must also understand that there is no absolute 100% correct way of doing this, because we were not there. Simply, we were not there, we never heard it. The closest thing we have is Yemenite Judaism and the Shomrim, the Samaritans. But the Shomrim have been Arabized. They have an Arab undertone to their Hebrew and the way they pronounce the letters. So what was the absolute ancient? For us to know this, or for me to know this, I'm turning to my strengths. When I say I'm turning to my strengths, this is what I mean. I'm turning to God, to HaKodesh Baruch Hu. I've been made to know that Jewish tradition is such that you cannot learn Torah if you don't have a rabbi. It's true that you can learn a lot easier and a lot readily without a rabbi. But the Shekhinah has taught me a lesson, and the Shekhinah is the same Shekhinah that got my family out of traditional African religions and out of Christianity and now into coming back to Judaism. The Shekhinah has always looked after us in Galut, and the Shekhinah just told me and whispered to me, not literally of course, but gave me an impression that I have to go back to my strengths to know what yesterday was like. The only way to know what yesterday was like is to ask the Ancient of Days, HaKodesh Baruch Hu, to give you the sound of what things sounded like in the past, for the cantillation and for the pronunciation of the Hebrew alphabet. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks of each person is that you do your best with what you have. So if I go to a Chabad nearby, which I hope to go to very soon, and they are talking about, they pronounce things the way they do, Beis Hamikdash. And sometimes I get lost and I'm like, what are they talking about? And then I'm like, oh, okay, it's the pronunciation. They are doing their best from the world that they were thrown into. Others are also doing their best out there. So in my eyes, there's no right or wrong. Everybody's doing their best. But I'm thirsty for the ancient sounds. Here's why I say that the Shekhinah has made this impression upon me. It's because in every advance in my spiritual life that I've had to make, it has been prompted by the Shekhinah. Hashem has looked after me. Hashem has led me. Even while I was in the churches, He always impressed upon me what the truth was, up until a point where I could see that the church was not my spiritual home. So how am I going to approach learning the Hebrew alphabet? In my personal prayer, in my personal study of the Torah, I will restore the original pronunciation. For two reasons. One, for authenticity. Number two, for meditation. Now, I'm not saying that all the Chachamim of the last 2,000 years were doing meditation wrong. Who am I? Who am I to even suggest that? I wasn't even there. But now that I'm going deep into God's Torah, I can tell that the ancient pronunciation is key to meditating. To meditating not only on Aleph Beit, but to meditating on the sounds of the universe and in recovering the sounds which God and Adam made when they were talking to each other. And my strength, going back to my strength, is connecting myself to the High and Blessed One. He's the one who reveals things to me. He's the one who guides me. He's the one who teaches me Torah. Baruch Hashem, I'm able to teach my students here in South America. This week I got communication from Colombia, the country of Colombia. People are being blessed by the shiurim that Hashem has allowed me to do every day at the cost of my time that I should be using to run my small business so that I can have all my needs met. But I consider the opportunity to study Torah to be much greater, and to study it with other people and to teach them as well. I appreciate the times that I had a rabbi who taught me, but I cannot afford one right now. So as a Shekhinah teaches me, and as I study the books, because Judaism is in the books, if you don't read, you'll never know. You'll always need a rabbi. So I'm not saying rabbis are not needed, but you need to get in the books. That's where the Judaism is. That's where the transformation is. That's where the transforming power is. That's when the Shekhinah gets close to you and shows you what is and what is not. So in just a couple of months of studying on my own and reading the books, I've been able to understand that teachings I've heard in the past in mainstream or in other groups were correct or incorrect. So there is no substitute for reading. Now, when I was coming back to Judaism for real, 2021, I was doing Shema, the Yemenite one. And I made a connection there. I made a connection with Hashem there. And I had a vision. In Judaism, people are very skeptical of people who have visions, because it's like, oh, the whole community should have a vision. But it really depends on your relationship with Hashem. I'm not a Navi, I'm not a prophet. I would never claim to be a prophet, because the era of prophets is long gone, so I'd be a false prophet. But I had a vision. And in that vision, I saw the primordial fire. And beyond the primordial fire, guess who was there? Adam Kadmon. And I understood Adam Kadmon to be a would-be figure of God. Eyes like fire, exactly like the vision of Ezekiel or Yechezkel. Eyes like fire, bronze face, beard, curly white hair. His feet were on fire, and literally the sky, the universe, the depth of the galaxy and the universe and the sky in its darkness was his footstool. The moon, the sun, the stars were under his feet. And on that day when I did that Shema, and on that day when I cry out to God for his Yeshuot, because my family, some members of my family were treating me very, very inhumanely, and I cried out to Hashem that he may intervene for me and fight these battles for me. In those moments, Hashem opened a curtain of primordial fire, and I could see his throne. I could see where he was seated, the Ancient of Days. Now, I'm not saying that Adam Kadmon is the Ancient of Days. Of course he's not. Adam Kadmon existed when Hashem contracted himself into Yud He Vav He. I'm not saying that was Hashem, but in the vision, that was Hashem. I cried out to see Hashem, and that's a vision I saw. Exactly the one of Yechezkel. So why am I telling you this about visions? I don't want you to believe or not believe. I'm just telling you that those of us who don't have the privilege of a Jewish community or are not readily accepted in mainstream Judaism because we might have a Bantu background or an African background, we actually do have an experience, a deep experience with Hashem. Because a lot of people from where I come from have a Kohanic link to Kohanim. And the Kohanim had spiritual gifts, of course, because of what they did. Just study the history of the Lembas and you will understand. I'm not a Lemba, but go ahead and study the history of the Lembas, for example, and hear their stories. So what I'm trying to tell you is, as Israel, whether we are readily accepted in mainstream Judaism or in synagogues or not, pending our potential to influence culture, we always have had the Shekhinah with us, even when we were lost. Some people don't like to hear that Jews can get lost, but believe me, I was lost. My family readily admits that we were lost. We were in absolute darkness, far away from God and Torah. But the Shekhinah brought us out by incremental enlightenment. So the same Shekhinah that got us out of those situations is the same Shekhinah that's guiding me now to understand what is the ancient sound, what is the sound of the temple, what is the sound of the teaching of the Torah that is original. Is it Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, or is it Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz? That's the question, and I'm going to find out the answer according to the same way I found Judaism, going back to my strengths, which is connecting with Hashem, with my mind, my heart, my being. And now I have added advantages of being able to meditate through the knowledge that I've gained through Judaism. I'm able to connect with Hashem through the understanding that I have found in the study of Kabbalah. More privilege now than ever before. Acceptance is not my game. My game and my desire is to restore or to go back to the tradition of my forefathers, and to go back to their music, to go back to their cantillations, to go back to what made their hearts joyful. And I will find that by going back to my strength, and that is connecting myself with the High and Blessed One. And I challenge you to do the same thing. Whatever I find, I'll obviously share with you on this platform. Tomorrow, I'm going to make a video tomorrow about what pronunciation I find. And going forward and continuing our Hebrew lessons, I'm going to be using that ancient pronunciation because I believe it is important to bring the Aleph Beit to life, to bring the primordial fire out of the letters, to be able to make the reparation that we need to make in the universe through the words that we speak. Words are very powerful in Hebrew. We create with them. We destroy with them, unfortunately. But we must repair as well using the words. We must read the Torah, and when we read it, it must come to life. It mustn't just be a text. It must be something that comes to life and recognizes the ancient music. What is my methodology? What is my strategy? I don't have one, but only going back to my strength, and that is crying out to Hashem, connecting with Him to show me another mile that I should walk in this road, and what I should teach His people who are like me, who are coming from all corners of the world, but for some reason we cannot readily relate to the culture and traditions that are the limited menu of mainstream Judaism. I have no problems, no issues with mainstream Judaism. I will consider it a privilege one day when I'm finally able to join a formal community and go to a synagogue, and I will respect their traditions. But in my own personal space with Hashem, in my own family, what I will teach my own children are the ways of our forefathers that will be restored in my lifetime, in me. Be'ezrat Hashem. This was meant to be a 5-minute video, but it's turned out to be a lot of blah blah blah. But in that blah blah blah, I hope you found something valuable. Have a lovely week, and I hope your Chag was as beautiful as mine, that your Purim was blessed, and that you didn't drink too much. See you later.